film opens in New York City with a view of the Millennium Building skyscraper. There, two perverted security guards use a telescope to spy on hookers in another building. When their boss summons them, they head for the elevator. One of them uses the restroom, while his colleague waits outside. At this point, the man notices the elevator acting strangely, and his flashlight gets crushed between the doors. But before he can figure out what happened, his colleague emerges from the restroom, and they both board the elevator. The next morning, we meet Mark and Jeff, two mechanics who work for an elevator company. Mark complains that his job is boring, but an irritated Jeff advises him to appreciate what he has. Jeff had arranged this new job for him, so he begs his friend not to let him down again. Back at the Millennium Building, a group of pregnant women enters the elevator, following their usual workout. However, rather than transporting them to their assigned floor, it begins to descend quickly. One of the terrified women presses the open button, which does not work. When they realize they are stuck, they panic and try to call for assistance, but there is no signal. The situation becomes so intense that two women go into labor. Meanwhile, outside the elevator, building officials become aware of the circumstances. Two workers are summoned and attempt to open the door but fail. A security guard becomes very concerned when he discovers that his pregnant wife is inside. He grabs a large axe and desperately tries to break the door. Finally, the door opens itself, and the guards are stunned to discover that two women have given birth inside. The scene then shifts to Mark and Jeff entering a diner for breakfast. They sit down to eat, but Jeff suddenly receives a call about the Millennium Building's malfunctioning elevators. This forces the duo to abandon their breakfast and rush to the destination. Meanwhile, we meet Jennifer, a young journalist, who is summoned to her boss's office. He updates her on the incidents involving the Millennium Building's malfunctioning elevator. He then orders her to go there right away and report on the story before their competitors. Jennifer soon arrives at the building and sees a large number of women being loaded into ambulances. She tries to interview them, but the medical staff leads them away. Meanwhile, Mark and Jeff arrive at the building and meet with its staff. The guy leads them to the engine room, explaining the previous incident. He also discusses Jeff's former colleague, Kowalski, who had done the unthinkable. But this only irritates Jeff, so he asks the guy to leave. The duo then gets to work, inspecting every machine in the engine room. But even after hours of inspection, they can't find anything wrong. A blind man and his dog can be seen leaving a salon somewhere within the building. He boards an elevator but quickly discovers that the buttons do not work properly. This forces him to leave and take a different elevator instead. But as soon as he opens the door, we notice that there is nothing to step on but a vast abyss. His dog barks repeatedly to warn him, but the man does not understand. Tragically, he falls into the elevator shaft, dragging his dog with him. In the evening, Mark visits his girlfriend at her home. After their fight last night, he brought her flowers to apologize, but to his surprise, he finds her sleeping with another man, breaking his heart. Meanwhile, two Millennium Building security guards are notified that the elevators are once again acting strangely. After investigating, they discover an elevator door that opens and closes on its own. One guard peeks inside and discovers the dog hanging from a rope in the shaft. Before he can report the situation, the door abruptly closes, trapping his head between them. He urges his partner to do something, but the elevator starts to descend. As a result, he is brutally decapitated, leaving his partner in shock. Mark then returns to the building and Jennifer follows him to the bathroom. She asks Mark about the elevators for her news story, but he dismisses her and claims that everything is fine. When she persists, he sarcastically remarks that elevators enjoy killing people and that 1 out of every 10 people who enter them may perish. Jennifer is dissatisfied with his response and continues to follow him, but the security guards stop her. Later on, Jeff and Mark meet with the building's manager, Milligan, and other executives. They inquire about the inspection, and Jeff responds that they conducted a thorough examination, but discovered no flaws. Mark then suggests that they close the elevator for a few days so that they can conduct further investigations. However, Milligan claims that it is not feasible because they will incur significant financial losses. Jeff agrees with him and assures them that the elevator is totally safe. When Mark arrives at work the next morning, he is surprised to discover that Jennifer has published his photo in the newspaper. She's also written about his claim that elevators are dangerous. His boss, Mitchell, summons him to his office and questions him about his statement. Mark apologizes, claiming that he was only joking and did not expect her to write about it. However, Mitchell reveals that as a result of the news, police are now considering Mark as a suspect. Later, Mark notices Jeff arguing with a man wearing a lab coat. When he asks his colleague, he learns that the man is Dr. Steinberg, who creates the electronic components of their elevator. Mark then inquires about Jeff's former colleague, Kowalski, and discovers that he did the unthinkable. He set himself and his car on fire. Meanwhile, we see two skateboarders entering the Millennium Building's garage. Moments later, one of them collides with a car and sustains injuries. He sits on the floor for a while, but then the elevator door behind him opens, sucking him inside. It then takes him to the 86th floor, where he is thrown out of the building and killed. Mark later sees the news on TV and learns that the police have ruled the death a suicide. He rushes to the building to investigate, but the guards refuse to let him inside. At this point, he spots Jennifer among the journalists and quickly approaches her. She apologizes for writing about him, claiming that she didn't have anything else for her story. Mark forgives her this time, but asks that she not mention him again in her paper. Jennifer surprises Mark with a visit to his home in the evening. She shows him CCTV footage of the skater's death, which is extremely unusual. Jennifer points out that the elevator normally takes 40 seconds to a minute to ascend 86 floors. However, in the video, the elevator gets to those floors in less than 2 seconds. The information shocks Mark, and he struggles to comprehend what is going on. They then proceed to meet Jeff and attempt to show him the video, but he appears preoccupied with something else. He refuses to listen to them and drives away. Later at a restaurant, Mark explains to Jennifer how the different parts of the elevator work. He also mentions Steinberg, who designed the elevator's electronic components for his company. The two then visit Jennifer's office and conduct some research on Steinberg. They discover his first name is Gunther, and he has previously experimented with organically reproducing computer chips using dolphin brains. However, the project went disastrously wrong and Steinberg was fired. He then began working for the elevator company, as he had extensive experience in the industry. After learning all of this, Jennifer is convinced that Steinberg is responsible for the mysterious deaths. The next morning, Milligan is wandering around the building when he finds Jeff's body in an elevator shaft. When Jennifer and Mark arrive, they are shocked to learn that the police have once again ruled it a suicide. Furthermore, the building executives label Jeff as a terrorist and notify the public that the threat has been resolved. Mark cannot believe his friend could do such a thing, so he and Jennifer set out to discover the truth. In the afternoon, the two decide to pay a visit to Kowalski's house, who passed away some time ago. They meet with his widow, who reveals that her husband was not killed in a car accident. She explains that he was murdered in an elevator shaft because he knew something he should not have known. According to the woman, her husband's spirit still haunts the elevator, which is why people keep dying. Back inside the building, we notice a group of people entering the elevator. When the elevator accelerates rapidly, things begin to go wrong once more. Someone quickly presses the emergency button, which clearly does not work. This causes everyone to panic, and one child even craps his pants. To make matters worse, the floor suddenly split, sending people falling into the shaft and dying. The elevator then accelerates until it eventually breaks through the building's roof. Following the incident, the President of the United States issued a statement describing it as an act of terrorism. A SWAT team is then stationed outside the building to keep anyone from entering. Meanwhile, Mitchell confronts Steinberg and blames him for everything. The latter claims that it is only a minor setback in his larger plans to change humanity. Mitchell doesn't believe it and urges him to find a solution as soon as possible. However, Steinberg claims that the situation has gotten out of hand and is beyond his control. Jennifer arrives at the building in a van, and Mark hides in the back seat. She claims he is from the elevator company, but the guards ask her to open the van door. Jennifer reluctantly agrees and steps out to open the door. Just then, she receives a call from her co-worker, whom she had asked to look into Steinberg. He admits that even after Steinberg was fired, he continued to work on biochips, albeit not with dolphin brains, but with something else. He advises Jennifer to exercise caution and hangs up the phone. During this time, Mark sneaks out of the van and into the Millennium Building. In the following scene, the cops discover that Jennifer was not sent by the elevator company and lock her up in a room. Mark, on the other hand, discovers a large biochip shaped like a massive brain in an elevator shaft. It turns out that this organ is still active and controls the elevators. He tries to destroy it with a screwdriver, but is unsuccessful when a burning elevator descends on him. Mark barely escapes, but the elevator kills a SWAT officer who was just exiting the shaft. Mark then discovers the officer's missile launcher and attempts to destroy the organ. But Steinberg arrives and steps in. He points a gun at Mark and warns him not to destroy his creation. The two then fight, with Steinberg nearly kicking Mark down the shaft. However, Jennifer arrives just in time and holds him at gunpoint. At this point, the SWAT team arrives and instructs everyone to drop their weapons. Steinberg seizes the opportunity to take Jennifer hostage once more, but she manages to escape. Moments later, The villain is attacked by his own creation and sucked inside, along with Mark. But Jennifer manages to get the missile launcher to Mark just in time. He then grabs the launcher and fires at the organ, ultimately destroying it. The force of the explosion pushes him away, and Steinberg's mutilated corpse falls seconds later. The scene then cuts to several days later, when Mark is seen leaving the hospital following his recovery. Jennifer arrives to pick him up, and as they leave, they get stuck in an elevator. She starts freaking out, thinking the demon has returned, but Mark suddenly starts laughing, revealing that it was all a prank. The film ends with him pulling her closer and kissing her.